Here we are again with Iconics. This is now our 53rd episode, and we are so blessed because today we have two guests. Yep, they're an item, they're dynamic, they're beautiful people, and they're unique in our industry. She married him for her sins. He just got lucky. He's originally from Glasgow, Scotland. He moved to the US in 1986. That was before most of you were even born. Anyway, he immediately went to beauty school, and in his spare time, he worked as a pizza delivery boy. That is until he got held up at gunpoint and ended up being separated from his pants. We're going to hear more about that story, but let me introduce you to the none other and the one and only Robert Cromeans and his beautiful wife, Mary Cromeans. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you. What an introduction. Oh my God, that's hysterical.
I'm glad we taped that. I want to use that one. I'm going to write that one down. Thanks, Chris. That was spectacular. And I think now that people know me, they know I hardly ever wear pants. So they're kind of not even surprised by that. But, you know, it's just a beautiful opportunity. We've known each other for many years in the industry. You know, long before there was Instagram, there was called shows, and I did some mileage. I got some high mileage, some freeway miles, maybe 6 million of them. And, you know, back then it was taking pictures and just doing the stuff. And if you weren't present in the room, you didn't see the show. It didn't appear in a video later. True. So I kind of grew up in a different era, but I love and celebrate. It was a great time, but I also love the digital world. I'm fascinated by being digitally dangerous. So it's not your age, it's the age we're in. So I'm able to adapt into the new future. So it's kind of nice. And like you so beautifully put, I travel with my wife. She's an incredible educator, but more importantly, just everything goes away when she squeezes me. We make out when we're stuck in airports, we make out. We're delayed in France. We don't give a shit. Get a room. We're quite happy because we're never apart. And that just makes my whole life complete with the balance of hairdressing, hair shows, and having the one that you love with you as you do it. So it's just a beautiful combination, a dynamic duo.
You're sweet. Thank you. All these compliments. What a way to start the week.
Yeah, there you go. It's only Monday, Mary. And you know what? Just so you know, Rob and Mary, we're recording, but you're only seeing, you know, sort of like headshot. You're cropped there. So whatever you're doing below, just doing it. Whatever keeps him happy.
Exactly. Thank you for understanding.
Yes, a little squeeze.
Yep. Okay.
Mary, I'm going to ask you a question first of all. How did you and Robert meet?
Oh my gosh. Well, I originally found out about him through a VHS tape, actually. So I'm originally from New York, and I went to beauty school during high school and was referred to a salon that happened to be a Paul Mitchell salon, but I got referred to because they had a training program for assistants. So the gentleman I assisted was also an educator for Paul Mitchell. So I went and worked for him, and I did not know anything about hair shows or any of that, working for a manufacturer. And so he would start training me with the Paul Mitchell video. So Robert was on a VHS tape, Jean Bra, things like that. So I was doing these haircuts, and I grew up in an Italian town, never heard a Scottish accent before. And I was like, he's so cute. But anyway, I was only like 17 or 18 years old. So he was like it's like a movie you're watching. So then the guy I worked for took me and the other assistants to the IBS show in New York City. And because he was also an educator for Paul Mitchell, and Paul Mitchell's such a big, open, inclusive family, he went backstage and he took all of us backstage to show off to the assistants like this great Paul Mitchell family he had. So I got to meet Robert, Stephanie Kachelski. Robert was traveling with his salon team at the time. So many of the people that I work with now, I got to meet them at the hair show. And I just remember thinking like, this is the circus and I want to join. Who are these people? Like, this is not upstate New York. Like, I need to be with these people. So I did meet him at a hair show. So of course, but there is a lot more to the story, but we'll get to that later, maybe. So I was just 18. I was 18 and I met him. And then I fell in love with Paul Mitchell as a whole. So I became an educator with Paul Mitchell and just started going to all the hair shows and just really like the hair show world is still the most fascinating place for me. I'm sure you know, because that's where I met you and got to see you and, meet all these incredible hairdressers. Like, I was just blown away.
No, but it's so cool, and it is. It's an incredible industry that we're in. I'm so proud to have been a part of it and taking a slight departure from it for now. But speaking of husbands and speaking of wonderful people and really hot guys, I'm going to introduce you now to my husband. And so standing in for our gorgeous Joseph Whitnick, who normally is my partner in crime on Iconics, is my lovely Andy Reese. And Andy is a phenomenal filmmaker. He's a documentary filmmaker. He's a sound designer. He's an artist, as in a painter. We put his art onto clothing and onto furniture and all sorts of things. And you must come and stay with us one day in Oxford. But anyway, Andy's going to ask you the next question. So, hi, my darling. Thank you so much for being with me.
Well, thank you, my darling. And this is becoming like a love nest of information, isn't it?
Right? It's like a double date.
It's like a double date, exactly. So I do have questions for the both of you, but I am going to address the first one to the young man. Robert, I read that you once said, and I've read a lot about you this afternoon, that most of your inspiration nowadays comes from the internet. Yeah. And I would like to know whether you think, well, explain a little bit more about that, but also, are the best artists the best thieves?
The best thieves, that's
the
cool.
Best thieves.
I think without a doubt that there is something of, even when we learn to do hair, you copy the instructor. And I would know as a kid, I would, if I could get a hold of a Trevor Sorby VHS tape, it was like gold. We had a tape of his latest haircut, because the only way to see stuff was to travel around and see the circus live, to see Vidal or Paul. You had to be in the building. So the reality of that, and in the old days, Chris, and I know you did it, we had to go buy Italian Vogue, we had to buy British Vogue, and I'd rip pages out. I'd buy a magazine for $300 and rip the freaking pages out to go show the art director what we were doing. So for me, living in a visual world is by showing evidence of what you're attempting, whether it's a mood board, a storyboard. If I've got a crazy idea with a show, I've got to find a thread of something on the internet that kind of gets you there, that you go, okay, I know what you're talking about. Because when you explain stuff to people, they don't always get it, but you really need visuals in this world. So if I'm working with choreography, it's visuals. I'm going to go see the Jabberwocky. I'm going to go research my ass off. And if you take an idea from one person, you are absolutely stealing. But if you take from many, it's called research. So I am researching every single day. And, we just did something with the London Alternative, and it just pulling the stuff from the universe. I found this beautiful shot. I was shooting in my salon. It's a color bar shot. And I did her head with color bowls and tint brushes. And her dress was blowing up rubber gloves all on the front, and it was spectacular. And he says, you're a genius. No, my phone is genius. I look around and then you interpret it to make it do or be the way you want it, or take it further or less. It's like a longer variation of a haircut. So I think that there is a certain part of thievery that I'm very good at, because I've had the show business experience. When I do the London show live, there's 17 shows. I watch every rehearsal. I am Johnny Depp, Pirate of the Caribbean. I am stealing your shit and making it better. I'll make it shorter and funnier and more interesting, but the idea can come from anywhere. And even people, when they watch a certain show and don't enjoy it, there could be an element in there I can take and then stretch it and do stuff. And I'm kind of known, especially as I've matured, for trickery, misdirection, making hair shrink, making color come out of clothing. I mean, there's so many tricks, and I often stumble upon them when I'm looking for stuff, and there's no idea, even on my fetish, which is balloons, when I go in and start researching the stuff I can find just on balloons. So I made a balloon dress for this collection, but they weren't inflated. It was just those long clown balloons with a collar, like a royal collar, all these colors, and then all these other balloons that were just flat with no inflation. Whereas if I said balloons, your mind thinks, but the reality was it was a shift. So that's, to me, where you're looking for the simplest things and how to switch it. So to me, I love the internet. I love what it does for me. And I can go anywhere. Pinterest, I go every TikTok. I love TikTok. In 15 seconds, they can tell you you're from Scotland without saying you're from Scotland. So it's paying attention to the rhythms and how quick you can make edits and stuff. And, never mind the stuff you're exposed to. Whatever you're into is coming your way. So it's my favorite toy. It's everything I live for, and I love just discovering stuff because I'm not really good at the written word or writing in what I want. So I end up finding crazy stuff that I shouldn't even be looking at, because that would make a show. This would make a show. And then I want to close it with this, Chris. The visibility I have for the talent of the world. There's a little guy I watch in Japan that my friends have watched him and quit doing hair. He's that good. A little guy I love in the UK, Gianni Sciamacchi. He's Italian, and the guy cuts hair, and he's my favorite. I would pay money to watch him. So I have access to everything I can imagine, and doesn't involve getting on a plane. And I think for young people, if they're listening to this, use that computer at the end of your hand, that helping hand you want in the industries at the end of your sleeve. Get into that, because the visibility you get is not something you and I got, Chris. We had to go find it. We had to be around the right people. And these days, I'm just saying, it's access 24/7. So there's no reason why you can't accelerate your learning and your growth. Just watching people and having these mentors that you may never meet in your life, but they can have such an influence on what you do and think globally.
Yeah. And that was such a massive part of why we created Iconics, was so that we could give access to a greater audience through the mentors that we've all been and we've all experienced, having mentors, and totally understand the importance of it. So it's wonderful. Just while you've stopped talking, Robert, I'm going to just ask whoever is listening in on us. We're delighted that you're here. However, your microphones are possibly still switched on, because now and again I'm getting some voices there in the background. I don't think it's my own little voices.
No, Donnie, it's the medication. I'm sorry, Mary. I'm sorry, Robert. It's the medication.
Mine or Joseph Whitnick's.
Yeah,
yes.
Joseph has some good meds.
Yes,
indeed. So, Mary, on from that, as I read this afternoon, you were the youngest of three growing up.
Yes.
What was the inspiration? Were you into hair? What was the fascination of hair and fashion there at a young age? And how did you inspire yourself to develop to where you ended up at the IBS and then working with the Mitchell organization? Tell us about your childhood.
Oh my gosh. Well, I had a nice childhood. I had a great childhood. Didn't have anything like crazy or trials and tribulations. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. It's called Schenectady, or Rotterdam, if you will. It's like really
Fancy.
Like smaller inside Schenectady, but I always wanted to do hair. I had an aunt and a cousin that did hair. I didn't really have much visibility to hair salons, so I don't really know where it came from. I found out later my mom wanted to be a hairdresser and her dad wouldn't let her. So I think maybe it was just in my DNA that I just always said I wanted to be a hairdresser, but I didn't necessarily like do a ton of hair as a kid. You know, my mom got me the doll that you could cut the hair and then you pull it and it grows again. My mom would buy color at the store and I would frost her hair and she would let me cut it. She like honed my skills. She didn't mind, which was really nice of her. And of course, my two older brothers, I would be like, hey, can I cut your hair? And they'd let me, but I wouldn't say that it was training. They did target practice maybe. So my parents were always really encouraging, especially my mom. And probably now in hindsight, she wanted to be a hairdresser. So when she heard that for me, she was like, yeah, you can do it. Do whatever you want to do. And in the school that I went to, they offered cosmetology as something you could go to and actually get all of your hours during your junior and senior year, 6 weeks in the summer also for perming, and come out of high school like ready to take your test to get your license. So I went and, it's funny because typically for the cosmetology school, like to be able to usually got sent there. Most people didn't ask to go there. So this was in 1992 to 94. Typically, like if young girls got pregnant out of wedlock or whatever, you'd get sent to a trade school. And that was basically what it was. And you'd get on the bus, you'd go go to Albany, which is the capital, and you'd go to school. So pretty much everybody I was in school with was pregnant. I was 15 and I was like the only one not pregnant. And my mom had to come to school and like fight for me to be able to go to cosmetology school because they were like, is she pregnant? And they're like, my mom's like, no, she wants to be a hairdresser. Like, let the kid go. If, you know, I was going to graduate when I was 17, and she was like, if she likes it, then she can go to work and have a career that she wants. If she doesn't, she can change her course. But I ended up being very fortunate. I got my license when I was 17. I fell into like 2 great salons, and a gentleman that I worked with pointed me in the direction of the salon that I told you about before. And he was like, you need to go work for this guy. Like, he will teach you everything. You'll assist. He'll show you how to cut hair, color hair, blow dry hair, all of that stuff. So I went to work for him. And through his passion and love for Robert, especially because he modeled his salon after Robert, we had assistants like Robert had in his salon. And we gave a great wash house experience like Robert did in his salon. And, you know, he was just really 100% in with Paul Mitchell. And so they had like they called it at the time an associate in training. So a new talent training, if you will. And I was 18 and very green and hungry and just in awe of all that you could do in the beauty industry. Cause I just wanted to do hair and I didn't really know what that entailed. And so I went to the training and fell in love even more because the educator spoke about this company of Paul Mitchell and the people who were in it that kind of made it work and happen. And I was like, oh, you're going to teach me how to do hair and show me all. And they only had like, I don't know, probably when I got in there was maybe like 30 products, 40 products. It wasn't, you know, there was no color or anything like that. And I got to go and teach classes, like on a basic level, I'd go and do product knowledge classes and drive all over like upstate New York. And I just had really great mentors out there that were in love with the industry and in love with hairdressers. And they were good mentors to me and very encouraging. So that was that.
A fantastic story. And how blessed were you that you could start at such a young age? Was
so lucky.
Have to wait a long time. Yeah, very lucky. So
I started late.
Yeah, right. So this is to both of you. What would you say is the most important lesson that life has taught you?
Life? Whew. I'm gonna have to take a pause for a minute. I was like, if you asked me about hairdressing, yeah, but life?
I think I'll jump in just because it's on my mind, and I'm, you know, a little older than Mary. So I would just say it's not just, you know, I've always tried to be creative and use my creative to talk business. But I would think the one thing that hairdressers and industry could pay attention to is the financial literacy is just as important as everything else. It's making a living. So yeah, you could be huge on Instagram, but if it's not paying the bills, and the only reason you're getting all that capture because you're not really busy, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to find a perfect balance of lifestyle. So it's figuring out, it doesn't need to be a massive house. It's whatever you're into, whatever suits what you're into, and understanding you got to protect yourself for the future, because you'll see salons don't even know how to get off this beautiful track of never endingness. Because once you start a salon, it's like a tattoo. And how do you get out of it gracefully? And I'm just saying some people don't have the financial means. And I would say for my own, I just thought I'm always going to make more. I think that's how hairdressers think. I'm just going to make more. I'm going to raise my price. I'm going to make more. I once used to talk on stage and said I made $1 million. It didn't help me a bit. I still spent 1.2. So as big as it gets, I'm just saying, I think if I could really leave something with how important it is. Yeah, the art's brilliant and working great and having a nice clientele, but pay attention to how you save, invest, and what you could be. There's a kid I listen to on Clubhouse. His name is Cash Lawler. He's a graduate of the school. He does a millionaire hairdresser, but it's not just on the doing the hairs, Chris and Andy. He's invested in real estate. He bought a fixer-upper. He fixed it up. He rents it out. And I have a lot of friends doing this type of stuff. What we learned through shutdown, we need some other hustles, some other sources of revenue.
We need passive income. Passive
income. So I just think there's some other ways that we can take advantage of the reach we have with our clients and the people we know, and take it as sound advice how we can help protect ourselves for a future and giving ourselves a better quality of life. And I'm not saying you couldn't be 70 years old and do hair, but only out of choice and passion, not to pay the bills. And I'm just saying that's a choice that we have. Run with scissors to your heart stops is my philosophy. I love it. I still want to do it. I'm not done. And I'm sure when I'm 90 years old, as long as I can move, I'm going up on that stage once Mary helps me. And I think it'll be kind of, interesting. I'm not trying to retire out of it, but getting, I work with a lot of accountant type people that look at P&L spreadsheets and all that stuff. It matters. And may not be your A subject, like, oh, I don't love it. Well, if you don't, you've got to do it in order to survive. And I think it's something you should give yourself a little lesson on it and get that literacy on the financial side. And I promise you, you may have a whole different point of view in life, because hairdressers can make a living. When we did some tapes together years ago, Chris, about, you know, Vivian's thing, I'm not just a hairdresser.
Yeah.
My favorite line there is when what's her name, Carol Brunetti says, Carol, it's not Carol,
Mary Brunetti.
Mary Brunetti, don't tell her I said Carol.
It's recorded. She's gonna know.
But she said she was an equestrian. I said, it's so great we let everybody into the industry. That was my favorite line in the movie. Anyway, where are we going there?
No, you're right. Here's the thing, Robert. And just as an aside, you know, when you reach 90, and I know you've done many IBS shows, but I can't wait to be at the front row of your, you know, speaking at the irritable bowel syndrome show in New York. But just you've had that before. But going back to the business side of things, do you think inherently creatives can become business people? Is it something you need to, or the average creative needs to learn? And to what extent, how important is that, learning the business side of things?
Well, I think to address that, one, you can be taught. It's kind of like I have a bit of a gift on stage talking my mouth off, but really what I have is experience. So I didn't know numbers coming out of beauty school. Hairdressers resist numbers automatically, yet they cut hair at time zones, 3:30. They mixed color 6N with 20 volume. They get paid with numbers. There's such a resistance. So I'm just saying, let's build a bridge, get over it, and get to where these numbers can protect you. It's kind of like painting by numbers. These are the numbers you want to look at. So I think that people should take the time to discover it. And often people most of the world would say they're not good with arithmetic and math. That's a fact. So when you throw numbers around like percentages and equations, most people don't know what the hell you're talking about. 80% of percentages are made up on the spot. So the confusion of numbers is apparent to everybody. So when we look at the numbers we work with, they're very scientific. We know what they mean. There's measurements. We call them vital signs. The same is true in business. I can look at a young kid who lives anywhere and look at their vital signs and tell you what type of career they'll have. In fact, I can look at kids in our Paul Mitchell schools that are not yet professionals, and I can look at their indicators through school and it'll tell me a lot about them. One kid said to me, she'd been in school for 3 years. I said, night school? She said, no, day school. She's had more days off than Santa Claus. Her indicator tells me she wouldn't be a great employee because she's not going to show up. So whether it's their average ticket, their retail to take home sales, their attendance, was it 104% or was it 50? So these indicators are something that you can really go by. And when people know how to work them, it's like a few basic notes, they can succeed no matter where they live. And I think that's a beautiful thing about that side of it. And I think anybody can pick it up if they just put their mind to it. And at first you're turning the page like, which way? And then eventually they start to speak to you. And I surprise people because of the way I look. And then they bring up numbers and they go, oh my God, you're a numbers guy. I go, gotcha. It really freaks people out that I can, look at a P&L or look at somebody's performance indicators or average ticket and find and discover things they could do better. So it's a kind of beautiful superpower, if you will, to have that disguise of looking like an artist, but thinking like a business person. I think this is a kind of good combination. Somewhere in the middle is the best advice. We're not saying be extreme either way, but be in the middle with it a little bit and at least have a basic comprehension. And, I failed in every level of school you could. So the fact that people now call me a numbers expert is ironic. My teachers at school would find that pretty.
That's because you weren't interested.
I wasn't. And that's the other thing.
Not because you couldn't do it. It's because you weren't interested.
It's the motivation. Lead a horse to water, can't make it drink. Add salt to the diet. What's your motivation? To know your business so you can control it. And whether you're a freelance hairdresser or part of a big team, these are all things people need to know. And as I say, this is a subject since we've been reopened, people are focused on because they're trying to deal with what we're trying to teach is fewer clients, more meaning. You don't need hundreds of them. With 3 or 4 well-placed clients, you can have the best day of your life without rushing, have lunch, have a break. This could be the greatest thing ever to happen to our industry when you really break it down, because we've been too pace-driven and we've been dropping the balls everywhere. So I'm just saying, let's slow the machine down and let's focus on each guest and delighting them to the biggest outcome which would be really the ultimate thing. And you don't need to work so hard, and enjoy them and let them enjoy you. And that's kind of what we've been working on since we've been reopened. And it's just a better relationship. My wife having lunch every day is a beautiful thing.
It's not good if I'm hangry, Andy.
Oh, I'm always hungry. Robert, would you consider this this way of thinking and your adoption of, because I'm dyslexic with numbers, so I'm right there with you. I'm one of the worst offenders of don't show me numbers. But would you say that this is your like greatest achievement, that you found a way to adopt the financial side of your art form?
Well, I think it's a learning process, unfortunately. And when we open salons, we just think we're going to build them and it's all going to work. And then we look at what we can bring in and we think, oh, we can make it work. And I'm just saying, if we really look at it as a business, that's what we got to remember. It's not a salon. It feels like it is. It feels like your heart's invested in it. But I'm just saying, at the end of the day, it's a business. So the more you can make it operate that way and have that relationship with it, I think is the key. Because I own salons, I got to know the numbers. And for many years, people would come to me and just assume I was like the icon, the mascot. So they would never sort of bore me with the details, but they'd be quite surprised when I would pinpoint something and go, what is this for? And they're like, how did you spot that? I'm like, well, I don't know what you're looking at. And the other thing I think for everybody out there, if it's an accountant, CPA, whoever they are, whoever you're working with, they've got to make it work for you. You should be able to explain it to me like you're explaining it to a 6-year-old. So it's not the big double-bounded spreadsheet. That's not what I need as information. You only need 3 or 4 things to need it. So that way, in creative's mind, we're not overwhelmed with data. We're just focused on the vital signs that can change what we're trying to do or move. And some of them, like certain things, don't change a lot. Rent doesn't change a lot. So there's a lot of shit you don't need to look at, but there's a lot of things like traffic count, retention, frequency of visit. When you master those, you need no more coaching. It just, you got it. And that's the mystery of it. And I think as the industry evolves, it should be in the middle as it teaches it. Everybody's too hair-sighted and not so focused on the business. Even when they're assisting, think of what an assistant does. They're not focused on how to create the dial. They're just watching, passing foil, putting color on, shampooing. We've got to take a bit of time to teach them the real ABCs of how you work a clientele. How do you keep clients that you touch? The drop-off rate after 6 visits in the industry is appalling. That's why most people can't build a business, because after 4 or 5 visits, they're bored of you. They've heard enough and they don't feel they're going anywhere with you. That is a huge number that the industry's got to pay attention to, like a Yelp review. So the reality of these numbers are so critical to everybody's evolution. And what I love about it, Chris, it fits in a freelance model or part of a team. It's the same thing, one case at a time. And that's why I love it as a broad stroke kind of industry message, because you can't say, well, I work as a freelance, I work in my own rental. None of that is an excuse. You're still performing each and every guest. And if you do it right, you won't need a lot of them. That to me is a lifestyle right there.
But I think the important part you said, sorry, Chris, to interrupt, was you have to, as a hairdresser, as a creative, if numbers scare you or you hate them or you don't even want to look at them, you have to find somebody who can speak the language that you understand, somebody who can take care of the business side, somebody who can take care of the CPA side, taxes, all of that stuff, and make it so it's easy for you to understand. It's the same way as for us as hairdressers, how we make our guests understand what we're going to do or the color we're going to do or the cut or whatever. Like, they have to work for you. And I think a lot of times we get intimidated by like the business person is so much better than me because they know numbers, and it's not the case. So you got to find that person.
So if I went back to school now and I went to a Paul Mitchell school, would this be a part of my curriculum?
Yeah, it's part of your experience because they're already working with Millennium software. So when I look at the data that I like to work off best, I reckon they use the same machine. So it's apples to apples. So when they come in for an interview, I'm like, what's your frequency of visit? What's your average ticket? Because if you're in school and you've got an average ticket of 45 or 60 bucks, let me open the door for you. You're coming to work here, because I can already tell that they're not scared of adding on services. So if they've got a good take-home score, retail score, too many salons hire hairdressers with no retail skill and then wonder why they won't do it. Why don't we hire retailers? Everybody else says, why don't we just hire people who love retail?
Yeah.
In fact, we just launched a new business model where we're paying, the piece they get comes off as service and retail combined. So if you had a $300 haircut and you sold $200 worth of retailer take home, you'd get credit for the 500, and we treat it the same, because I want to break the barrier. I want a retail culture. I don't want people to sell a bottle, because to me as an owner, when we sell it for 10 and we make, you know, the hairdresser gets $1, they're not really motivated to do it. But what if they made more, they'd sell more. And even though I'm making less, I'm selling more. So at the end of the day, and what if it's a career stopper? Meaning, if you were getting that type of pay structure, where would you ever go that you would be matched to that point of view? That your estheticians do it all the time. They do a facial and then they give you all this shit, and it's like $7 million. I'm just saying they have a higher retail to service ratio than any other industry. We need to get to that level and stop worrying about Amazon as a competitor. Let's focus on each client sitting in our chair and what's the needs they have. And we started a brand new brand just this week. We had interviews with 6 kids yesterday.
Mhm.
It's called The Cutting Room. We only focus on cutting hair, treating hair, and selling products. We start off with technology. We analyze the hair. And when I told them yesterday we were paying them the same from retail to service, they cheered. They hadn't even got the job yet. They're like, that sounds it, because the industry's closed down to 10%, 10%. So where's the hairdresser? You get 20% in tips. So nobody cares about the bonus. And that's not the only reason you should sell it. But what if there's other reasons we put in to give them more information? Retail really turns into retention. Did they buy into the shit you said today? Because if they said no on retail, they didn't believe you. You have no authority. So these are the sort of things that we're looking at as a futuristic point of view, because I was a bit of an expert back in the day, because all of our schools have a color bar, a wash house, take home center. That came out my little head when I was a kid with my first or second salon. But then I went through a 25-year dry spot, just sticking to what we knew, and the death of Tower Records, Toys R Us, and then we had a pandemic. So without really realizing, I had a point of stop. The boat stopped so I could repair and rethink, reimagine, look at the new workforce that want to work less and get paid more, that want flexibility. All my team have a key. I mean, this is a whole new world. We got to break down that gridlock of this is how you're going to do it. When I was working with the close down, I was talking to a lot of people in the UK. They're like, well, we're adding to our manual. Is that what a millennial wants to come in and learn the manual? First of all, it should be digital. It should be fun. It should be moving. I just think there's a real interesting perspective of the future of where we can go as salon owners, inspired by Amazon and behaviors and technology, that sort of touch and tech combination, not one more important than the other, still needs the service provider with a heart. But this is an exciting time for us to rethink it. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the shutdown. So in a way, because we had 3, and every time we shut down, we changed our rules again.
It was a blessing.
And when I gave my
disguise.
last team a big rule change, they said, well, we've been changing anyway. I've never, before some of the shit I've done to this team, they would have walked out the day I did it, had not been for the pandemic. I took away assistants. I took away cappuccino. I took away magazines. I took away,
ballet, everything.
Everything. I just said, this is not the way we're going to operate for now based on what's happening. It wasn't my fault. And they went for it. So every time we make changes, they're self-checking out. There's no cash in the business. I mean, it's like, I don't even recognize our own company. So we are moving light years ahead and trying to think of what is tomorrow. The huge American influence is 70% are freelancers. And most people that aren't just sort of say, well, they're doing this, we're doing that. We got to come together. You'll learn from both. That's where flexibility, 70% of the industry are checking out their own clients. So that's why we went to self-pay. That's why a client like Mary she can check a client out. She's been in the salon 3 hours. Should she go wait in line at the desk to pay? Where are we at Denny's? I mean, let's go technology here. Let's take a leap forward. And I think that's what's exciting right now in the beauty industry.
I so love what you're saying, that you took advantage of us all being locked down. And instead of thinking, oh, poor me, how am I going to pay the bills? What am I going to do? You were like, no, let's rethink this stuff. it's so wonderful. It's like music to my ears.
The death of every culture is its culture. And
Yep.
that's the part you were given a pause for, you know, that everybody always likes to say, this is the way we've always done it. And we were guilty of that. We had sort of done stuff, but there used to be a song back in the day by Orange Juice called Rip It Up and Start Again. And I just think not every little degree of it, but there are certain things we should look at and analyze and discuss with the team. Things like we've been pretty passionate about a dress code. Everybody wears black coming to work. We look like we're having a Mormon get together outside of our salon. And yet in a free world, they'd rather wear flowery shirts and shit. So I'm just saying there's rules we got to look at, the flexibility, giving them keys. This is things that no owner would have done 15 years ago. You think everybody's trying to steal your shop. That's not the case. They want flexibility. Client wants a touch up 9 o'clock on a Sunday. They got a key. They know how to check it out. So they don't really need somebody to be in the building to take care of some of the other jobs. And, you know, when Mary self checks out a guest, she's got the rebooking and she already knows how much time it needs because she knows what she does to your hair, Chris. She's made the reservation while the color's processing. She's got the laptop in front of her. It's all paid for, the product's included, it's all done. And it's a one-stop shop and you're not dropping the ball. And I think this is a big change for the industry. And again, that pace has a lot to do with it, that she's more effective with 3 clients with a full ticket instead of 6 with a half a ticket. So we're seeing a whole change that is becoming more self-reliant. Again, years ago, I think why, if 70% of the clients are being checked out in independent salons by the hairdresser, it means the hairdresser could do it. And that means you could maybe compensate the hairdresser further because you're not paying a middleman to take care of some of the duties that we used to. Rebooking, there should really in the future be no phone ringing.
Mhm.
Yep.
Do you hear a phone ringing?
Yeah.
Is that JP? I mean, that's the only time I want to hear the phone ringing, because the reality is it should become a thing of the past. If we understand the control and rebooking of every guest before they leave, that's a game changer. Why do I need to call you? And nowadays they're using DMs, they're text. I mean, it used to be the salon owner took the book home. Now they have access to everything. There's no hidden information. It's transparency.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
On that note, guys, just as an aside, darling, for your information, Orange Juice and for both of you two are actually playing in February the Oxford O2 Academy. So come over, okay, and we'll go to the gig.
Yeah, that's down the road from our house.
There we go. We're coming.
Twist my arm. But don't be mad. I don't know who Orange Juice is, but I'm happy to go.
No,
Good.
a seminal Scottish band from the 1980s, aren't they, Robert? Yes, they are.
I'm going to Google that.
Okay, so here's a question to you both, all right? You are hosting a dinner party and you are wanting to invite 3 guests from the industry, both past and present, and 3 people in history, past or present, to come. Who would they be?
Oh, well, for me, I never met Paul Mitchell, so it has to be hands down. I don't know if you need to have a dinner with him, but I would have to have Paul Mitchell because I hear all these stories about the man himself and my imagination runs wild. Like I would love to have that moment. That would be incredible. That's number 1. My second for the present, they have to be in the industry?
No, 3 of them are in the industry and 3 of them are from any walk of life.
Alicia Keys. Alicia Keys. You can chime in. I don't have to do all 6 of. Who else would you pick?
Well, obviously Paul Mitchell, because he was.
I already called it.
Yeah, but I mean,
we get an extra person. I already called it.
Well, I was going to more give the reason.
Okay, go ahead.
If you don't mind.
Oh, excuse me.
So I met him as a kid. I did work with him on stage, but I was a baby. I didn't, you know, my partner was kicking me, go, be funny, say something. I couldn't say a word. I was hypnotized by him. So the reality of that and who I've become, because he was definitely a renegade. He didn't do a conform. There was no Instagram to haunt him. He was his own man. And that sort of crazy side I adapted really was governed by him, even though I didn't know him that well. Just watching him on stage taught me everything I needed to do. He was a showman. He used theatrics. I know you interviewed Angus a few weeks back. You know, when I watched Paul, I was in beauty school. He would roller set hair with balloons and come out and pop them and brush it through. He used a curved comb. He used surgical tape to cut hair. He used flat toppers on women to make this crazy shape. He just had no shame of what he would go for and what he was going to make happen in front of an audience. And for me, that unlocked the kind of Pandora's box of what could I imagine. I was never limited by, oh, this is the way everybody does it. Paul was not that type of guy. Vidal's another one, and I had relationship. I've sat in Vidal's lap twice, and not many people can say that. But he makes me cry like a little angel boy when he speaks to me and he mentions my name. It's just the most, you know, my mom watched me in London. I dressed up as a transvestite clown and did this lip sync about being a middle-aged hooker, and it was funny as shit. And Vidal quoted the show that night and said my boyfriend would be here on Tuesday. But my mom's in the audience. She couldn't believe Vidal said my name. And I just think he just had that effect in my career. And even though I never really worked with a man, I just fell in love with him later in life and the way he spoke to an audience. So he would have to be there for sure from the industry part.
I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like, would you not want Salvador Dali? I mean, he's on our wall and you quote him a lot.
I do like Salvador
I know everyone's
Dali.
dead that we're talking about.
No,
but
no, I would actually go for I would go for Alexander Mcqueen. I know he's not of the hair industry, but the hats I wear, a lot of the shows I would be inspired by. There's so many things. And I think he invested a lot of his gain in the wardrobe, in the fashion business, right back into the show. It was almost the whole budget went back in. And to me, I think out of everybody, and I work with Galliano, I work with a lot, Jean Paul Gaultier, but for me, he steals the show. He was the ultimate showman. And what a loss to go. And I'm so happy I get to wear some of his clothing and stuff. But, you know, he had a real circle of influencers that worked around him. So I would just say.
I would like to say, in honor of Alexander Mcqueen, my thought was Guido Palau, who did used to do a lot of hair for his runway shows. And the ones that looked like when they wore those crazy shoes that they looked like almost alien feet. And then the hair they looked like rib cages. It was braided and it was up and 3-dimensional. I'm like, how do you even know how to do that? That would be cool. And then people who aren't in the industry, I have to say Chelsea Handler because I love her. And then I have been very fascinated with Banksy. You guys obviously must know because he's UK anonymous.
No one knows who he is.
Exactly. That's why I'd want to have him at dinner. And I'd imagine he'd be in a blackout.
But
I still wouldn't be able to know who he was.
But Mary, how would you know it's him?
Yeah.
That's what people say about me, Andy.
It'd be true, Andy, but that's who I would want. And if that was my wish list, then he would have to be the one that I would not take an imposter. And he could be in a blackout. He could wear a veil. I don't need to see him, but I would want to it's genius, really.
So that's the second reason you need to come over in February. The first is to come and see Orange Juice, and the second is to come and see a recent Banksy at Reading Jail, which is where Oscar Wilde was incarcerated back in the late 1800s. And Banksy famously, as if by magic, put this wonderful escapee graffiti. It was only about 2 months ago, so you must come, and that's very close to us too.
And then the third was Chris already invited us to your house in Oxford. So there's 3.
There is 3 indeed.
Oh, it would be so cool to have you guys over here. I would love it. Do you get back to Britain anytime, like often? Or do you just mention the alternative? Are you doing the alternative?
Yeah,
we did it, but virtually.
We just finished the second virtual. The show is actually quite beautiful. It's controlled, obviously, it's not live. But Tony's been doing great with it. So we just did another kick-ass one. Last year, we did something about, can't wear a crown with your head down, very inspired by equity and opportunity. It was fantastic. So we're still doing it. But when I would go to London to do that show or the trade show there, my mom would come visit when she was alive. So I wouldn't, and Sundays we go up to Scotland. Mary loves Scotland. We haven't been that often, but we often go into London. We tend to be on the English side of things, not so much the Scottish, and had never done a show in Scotland or Ireland, but we're still working on it. But
we need to make that happen.
Yeah, why not? Me and Angus could do it. He's got the Scottish heritage. His mom and dad used to live in a little part of Scotland called Carnwath. It's in between Glasgow and Edinburgh. But, that would be a kind of wish of it.
The closest we got was we went to Greece this year in September, and we flew through London. That was it. So we haven't really truly, until this last month, we haven't traveled in almost 2 years. So getting to, we used to go to London though, once a year. And then we have had, like, where do we want to go on vacation? Okay, let's go to London and stay in London for, 10 days and be in the UK. But we love Europe and the UK.
No, my hat makers there, all the fashion plays. I like London a lot.
Who is your hat maker in London, Robert?
Philip Tracy.
Yeah.
And they do the royal family and all that good stuff. Sometimes I put my hat on, I look like the Queen.
These are ladies' hats. The hats that we get for him they're the female version, but I think they're gender neutral because the men's hats are much smaller. They're more fedora-like.
Yeah, more fedora, but I've always liked sort
fabulous.
of exaggeration. So I've had to have maybe 5, 6, 7 hats made by him, and I just love it.
Or
Again,
like 12.
maybe 12. Yeah. So I haven't really met him, but he's kind of shy, but he has wrote me little letters and books and stuff. So, and obviously I'm a pretty reasonable customer, but I know he's on the internet a lot because he has no real, correlation. But I know I cut hair with my hats sometimes, Andy. I put them on hair and I clipper cut, scissor cut. I do all sorts of. So he must just shit his pants when he sees this hat that should only be worn at the Derby, and I'm up there throwing it around, sweating. I get more out of his hats than I think any other customer he has, because mostly it's a one-time deal for most people. They wear a hat and it's done. But I wear them and they age and they travel and they kind of change personalities. And it's kind of fun. And I just got a hat made, a boy on the internet, but it was not Philip Tracy, but I had known him through a hair show. He had Instagrammed me, but we're going to a wedding in Hawaii, and it's a love heart up top. It's so gorgeous, and I can't wait to sport it. So I bought a new hat on my own. My wife said, I can't.
On his own, online. He did it via the interweb.
He's an Italian guy who lives in New York. So anyway, he's super good. And he's, of course, looking at my profile on Instagram, and he's like, oh, you love hats. I'm like, yeah, I love hats. So I feel like I'm cheating, but I also think it's kind of fun to kind of bridge out a little bit. But, I just kind of,
you're the client that cheated on their
I
hairdresser.
like hats. I was at a show a couple of years ago, Chris, you'd love this. And it's the BTC show, and they have a pretty big audience, about 6,000 people. And Mary and I walk out for the morning ceremony to say hi to the audience, like you do at big shows, and all the teams come out from all the different companies. And Mary and I come out and sort of walked, and everybody clapped. No, nobody clapped. But anyway, they didn't. No love. This internet crowd had never seen me before, which means I'm going to rip your heart out. So after I performed, it was overnight success. But the funny story I want to tell you is I go down to the coffee shop. I'd taken off my hat and I was standing in line, and this young lady come up to me and said, don't be offended, but you look like Robert Cromeans. And I just got a message from her this year. She sent me the picture again and repeated what she had said. I thought that is hilarious. I'm the only guy in the world, Andy, without a hat on, I'm in disguise. When I'm in hat, people see it coming in. It enters the room before I do, and it's just something I kind of like. It's like in the 80s, girls wore shoulder pads. The bigger the hat gets, the bigger I get. It just keeps getting there. It's going to be a sombrero soon.
That's all right.
Absolutely. It'll still look fabulous. What is the most bizarre thing that you guys have done with hair?
What were you going to say? I was going to say Robert had this crazy idea to make hair shrink. It goes back always to the alternative hair show. I don't mean to tell your story, but I'm gonna. Sure. And he wanted, at London Alternative Show, you can't be on stage doing hair. So they have limitations, but also you can do whatever you want, but you can't be on stage doing hair. It's a pre-done show. The girls can dance and walk, no hair to be done, which is not usual for Robert. Like, he's like, I need a ta-da, we need a trick. So he started with this fascination of it started with a dress, and it was a remote control operated. The dress was like rigged, and at the end of the show, the girl's in the middle of the center of the runway, and her hair gets finished getting cut, and then the dress rises up to be from long to a mini dress, and then he's like, we need to do this with hair. And so then that was it's nuts to watch, and I'll let you take it, but it's incredible because Robert has this innate ability to surround himself with people that can really, really create magic, and each person has a specific role in making that happen. He's true visionary, and the way he gets everyone to collaborate and be a part of something so unusual and I feel like mind-blowing, because especially for that, I mean, Tony Rizzo, who, you know, he is the founder of the London Alternative Show, and him and his team, and Anthony Moscolo, they've been around for a long time. It's hard to make people who have been around and have so much experience and have seen everything go like, oh my God, no way that happened. Like, they could not stop talking about it. We have it on video, and seeing that, like, I don't even know how you think of these things. Actually, you're genius.
Well,
Banksy.
Not really. I think it's thinking of the audience. I watch these people watch, and I know that when the models come out, that after a minute you've seen it, can't control it. There's limitations that then become the place of where do you put buttons in to make the audience respond. Because when I'm watching the show live, I'm watching this show, but I'm mostly watching the crowd. I'm watching what they respond to. What did they react to? What did they laugh at? What were they not interested in by their own chat starting? You know, most people don't pay attention to an audience the way I do. Most people just think of the stage. The stage is only the viewpoint from the audience. So when I'm starting in a rehearsal, I sit in the house for much longer than anybody else does. They all run to center stage to rehearse. I want to sit in the house, learn a bit about the room, and know where the buttons are, know where I can put myself. People build me stages and I go on and come into the room, and I never get on stage because it's too far away from the people. I do the whole show from the audience. And if I'm doing business seminars, people say, I built you a stage. I go, I didn't ask for it. Why would I want to create distance from me and them? Why not just walk around the room? So the one thing I will tell you about the creativity is it's risky. So the first time I closed up a show with the shrinking whatever, it didn't work, Chris. And I'm just standing there, and it must have budged about a quarter inch, just this much, nothing. If you watch the tape, you can see it shifted, but nothing really happened.
If you knew what to look for.
And I think a lot of, for me, it's about taking a calculated risk. And by the next show, I had it right. My favorite time of doing it, I would cut this hair with my hat, start spraying it, and then I drop to my knees and start spraying the dress, and the dress would rise up. So people thought it was the hairspray. So it's kind of looking at just tricks that make the audience go wacko.
So the one girl in Alternative, and Noogie Tai is a guy that is our Paul Mitchell editorial director, and he's just incredible. He can do anything with hair. He turns it into this insane fabric. So we had a girl with a black bob, and she had long fringe that was, of course, artificial. He placed that in, and we had two people placed at the front deck, our choreographer and our wardrobe master. She was the one who rigged everything with like the remote control and wire. And then as the girl goes to the middle center stage, then her fringe comes up, and then it makes it to be like middle, like, you know, micro bangs. And then the other one was this girl with long hair, and it was almost two mohawks, and it was kind of floppy. Like the hair was sort of like just, it was pretty, but it was kind of floppy. And then she gets to the center, and her hair shrinks in and almost folds like origami, and becomes like these two more like pristine mohawks. And then the last girl, she had the, hers was more like an accordion, but hers was her hair and her dress. Yeah. And she had like, you know, fishnets and those, what are the stockings called?
Suspenders.
Suspenders, thank you. Yeah, and it was so much to see. And then the beauty of it is you can only do like 3 minutes max. Like that's the length of the show. It's not like this is 45 minutes long. It's 3 minutes. You spend like 20 hours working on it, and then in 3 minutes it's done. And like the audience is like, wait, what happened? Yeah. It was so cool.
Yeah.
I think The Alternative is probably one of my most favorite shows to do, where you don't have that pressure of being on stage, but you can just create. Oh, it's fabulous. Oh.
Well, it's, you know, again, that limitation creates a thing. One year I did the lip sync, so I did get to be on stage, not doing hair, and I loved it. It took about a half bottle of vodka to get me ready for it. I did it once in London. They had an Alternative in Chicago a couple of times. I did it once there. And I remember one of your buddies is in the audience as I'm walking out. He's starting to get it, because at that show, when they do the walkout wave, I sent a stunt double that was wearing what I wore all day. So everybody thought it was me. So they had no idea that I could transform. And even when Anthony Moscolo watched me rehearse, he said, your show is incredible. I said, it's even better. I'm in it. He said, no way you're doing that. I said, well, I'm doing it. It was just incredible. But when I was doing it in Chicago, I'm kind of walking out on stage, and people are starting to get that it was me. Whereas in London, nobody knew who I really was. So they just thought I was a bad ballerina.
No, they thought you were a male model.
But it was so much fun. It was probably one of the funnest moments of my life. And then after the show, Vidal mentioned it, and I was just in the audience crying what was left of my makeup on. It was quite an experience. And, you know, it's at the Royal Albert Hall, Andy, so it's not too shabby.
It's indeed.
So I can always tell everybody I performed at the Royal Albert Hall, which is not where every hairdresser gets to perform. But I love what, you know, Tony's done, what Anthony's doing. It's a fun show. And, you know, as I say, for me, I usually love the danger of being in harm's way, doing stuff. So that's just the element I enjoy. So I find it a very difficult show to figure out what everybody's going to do, that I'm going to sort of stand out amongst that crowd. And the crowd's been tough. We've been doing it for years. They started out, we get nothing, this much applause. And over the years, me and Angus and different, we've just stolen their heart. When we come out, they can tell we're happy to be there. You know, the British are awesome hairdressers, but they don't always tell their face. You know, so they'll come walking out and look like they were, you know, they're with the Queen getting an OBE, and like me and Angus are coming out, yay, and crowds going nuts. We're like, that's what we come for, the meet the people. So it's a kind of fun one.
Remember the lady who is she was the manager at the Philip Tracy store. We got her, she bought a ticket and came to the show one year, and she had her fascinator on, and she follows Robert and loves the shows and all of that. And she's so cool.
Fun one.
So given the experience you have, guys, question, what advice would you guys give to your 18-year-old selves?
I did this question the other day.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, I was asking it. So they didn't. So no, you're fine. I was asking it. I had a few of my colleagues in front of a school. So I was asking them, if you knew then what you know now. It's kind of how I broke it down.
Yep. I would say for me, it's say yes until you have to say no. Remember about good self-balance for yourself so that you can have self-care and take care of yourself, but say yes to every opportunity, no matter what. You never know what you can get from it, whether you have a learning experience that tells you, oh, I'm not going to ever do that again, or, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this turned into that. There's just sometimes saying yes and being present is everything, and being the one that showed up.
Say yes to the dress.
Yeah.
I think for me, Andy, starting sooner. I didn't start doing hair till I was 24. So if I'd started like Mary or like most apprentices in the UK, 16, 17 would have been a sweet spot. But you know, the kind of, I missed that, especially as a kid when I'd hang out with an Anthony Muscola or other people that started at that young age. I started quite late. I was a late bloomer. So it was quite interesting to play that catch up. But one thing I had going for me, I had a Scottish accent. So people didn't know what I was saying. So they're like, he must be good because I can't understand him. And that's probably how he wants it, uneven. That's probably what he was looking for. You get a lot of forgiveness to that kind of point of view.
Do you think your career would be different though if you started younger because you would have still been in Scotland? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over the questions.
No.
Just curious.
That's a good point.
It could have taken a different turn. You never know. I could have ended up on the British side of hairdressing. And I
still think it would have been dynamic though.
I honestly sort of feel very much a product of the USA as far as the showman in me and all this stuff. And when I work in the UK, it's quite apparent I'm not British when I'm on stage. I occupy the space differently. I talk to the crowd. I work with the people. I'm very, you know, that's just what really gets me excited. And that's not really the way it works. And I think I learned that as a dynamic in the US market, trying to work like we did at the IBS. I was a busker. I mean, we on a stage, Pied Piper trying to get in crowds. And sometimes I could get 2,000 or 3,000 people on the carpet. It was an ability that, you know, people said, well, it's easy for you. You're famous. Long before I was famous, I could do it. And even when I go to other countries, I'm not famous, I can still do it. Once I hit the stage, I'm pulling the crowd in. So, you know, that sort of busking experience is probably my favorite thing about being me, that you control that experience with an audience and they will stand on your stage all day. And Chris knows that to be true. We really, I love that era. And that's a part of the business I think is going to die off to some degree. One, a trade show is so expensive. There's no real return for manufacturers in it.
Though.
Oh, they were fun. But again, technology has given a different viewpoint. I think hairdressers are always going to want to get together. So that's cool. But do we need a permission from a trade show to say, let's come in? So I just think having gone to those long before the COVID epidemic, I seen how these shows had just diminished and diminished and diminished, probably as a result of, in some ways, the internet and the available information, as we made mention of many times today. Used to be the only way you got the information from Chris was sitting in Chris's audience. And now with technology like we're doing now, this is like a Walt Disney movie. It's going to live longer than we are. It'll have access. I do things with the schools a lot. There may only be 100 people online, but then it goes into their little data, and then thousands of people over time keep watching it.
Yeah.
That's what you're leaving when you're talking about common knowledge for the industry. So, you know, I wish I had started sooner, but like Mary mentioned, it may have turned out differently.
You
And
might not be my husband right now.
I think that was inevitable.
Okay.
I will say when she was 15 years old in her yearbook, what did you write? 15.
I did write that I was going to move to California and travel the world doing hair and being a great hairdresser.
And here's
I
my
did.
final question, Mary, and I'll leave Chris to wrap this up with her question. But as we all know, as I've read, you know, the world knows that in a next life, Robert is and wants to become a woman. Okay. My question to you, Mary, is: would she still be your soulmate?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I do believe we have more than one soulmate, whether it's romantic or not. My very best friend, my mouse, I think she's my soulmate. We have a special relationship. But yes, Robert Cromeans, even if he was Roberta, I would definitely still, I'd follow him. He would be my mentor. We would connect and he would be my soulmate. She would be my soulmate.
I gotta chime in, Andy. You can't leave it. It's the other way around. I said in my past life I was a woman, and then the reason I know that is that's where I got the attitude from. So,
okay,
That's true. That's true. His past life.
in the way I love clothes.
He likes to wear a dress. He does. So it is kind of, I love him in a dress. He looks amazing in a kilt. He looks good in a John Paul Gaultier skirt pants.
Yeah. I have no problem.
Take him however
Mary
he comes.
mentioned she came to the New York show. One year she brought her parents, and her dad said, "Which one's Robert?" And she said, "The one in the dress."
I know. He like whispered to me. He was like, "Mary, he's wearing a skirt." I said, "Dad, he's Scottish. It's a kilt." He was like, "Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay then." I said, "It's a kilt. It's not a dress."
Yeah. So first impressions.
Robert,
Yeah.
you have such an incredible style. You and Alexander McQueen would have been best buddies for sure, and I would have been your mate as well.
All right, well, he's coming to dinner in a few weeks. I'll let you know.
He is, yeah.
We've organized it.
You guys, we could talk to you forever, and we want to talk to you forever when you come and visit and stay with us in Oxford. But right now we have to wrap up Iconics. But if you missed this, which you wouldn't know you missed it, but we're going to let you know that you missed it, but you can go on to YouTube and watch Iconics live. So when Andy's done his magic with the editing of it, we'll send it to you, and please show it to the world.
Thank you so much. I feel so honored to be included on this.
Yeah. And when we come in live, Andy, you can film us, and we'll do Iconic live for sure. Live, we'll do it all in one room.
Absolutely.
With some wine or something.
Yeah, multicam and any number of costume changes.
Not for me. I'm a one costume wonder.
That's
all right.
Thank you guys so much.
You and I, Mary, will be the audience.